In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the front brake calipers on this Ram 2500. Let's get started. I have aftermarket wheels here, but if you have the original wheels, use your socket and remove all the lug nuts. I have to take off this cover first. I need a special socket adapter to take these lug nuts off. Whatever socket size you need, remove all 8 lug nuts. Remove your wheel. Before removing the caliper, I'm going to use a 15mm wrench. Break free the banjo bolt. These things are quite tight, and breaking it free and then snugging it up will allow me to more easily remove it once the caliper is dismounted. Now we have to remove the two 17mm bolts that hold the caliper onto the bracket. The pads, unfortunately, can only come out through the outside, so we have to separate this. Take one out. Leave that in a couple threads so it can hold the caliper for you. Remove the bottom one. Now remove both. Pull the caliper off. Set it aside up on top of the upper ball joint here so it doesn't pull on the brake hose or the ABS wire. Now remove your pads. Pull them out towards the outside. Set them aside safely. Now with a 24mm socket, remove the 2 bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the front axle. There's one. I'm going to leave this one in a couple threads just so it can hold the bracket on while I remove the bottom one. Remove both bolts and pull the bracket away. On the new bracket, we have to grease up the points where the anti-rattle clips go. Just a thin layer of grease. I'm using brake-rated silicone paste, so it is good for high temperatures. You want to make sure that whatever you're using isn't going to melt, and you only want to put on a thin layer. Otherwise, when you put the anti-rattle clips on, they're actually going to squeeze out all the grease, and it'll get in the center here where the rotor is. That would not be good. These have a larger hook and a smaller hook. Smaller hook goes on the inside, larger hook goes on the outside. Press them down tight until they click. They should sit nice and flat on here. If they don't, that means they are not seated all the way, so you need to address that. Otherwise they can fall out and interfere with the rotor and the pads might not even sit in all the way. Do the same on the other side. And once you've done the same on this side, let's address the slider pins. You want to pull these out. They do have a little bit of grease on them already, but I like to pack a little bit of extra grease in the slider pin boots. That's going to act as a reserve of grease. Work it in there and put the slider pin back in. Squeeze out the air by pressing in on the pin and squeezing the boot out. Any excess grease will also come out. Take the other one out and do the same thing. Take the bracket, line it up with the front axle, slide your 2 bolts through. Make sure they thread on smoothly. Once you get one started, you can let go and start the second one. Bottom these out and torque them to 260 foot-pounds. That's one. And 2. Slide your pads in. Make sure the hooks on the top and on the bottom go over the anti-rattle clips. Just like that. There we go. They should slide in smoothly. Take your new caliper, slide it over, and have your bolts ready so you can start them in. Once you start one, line up the other and start that one as well. The torque on these is only 24 foot-pounds, so I'm not going to tighten them too much with this. That's one. and 2. I like to prepare the caliper for the new hose, and that means popping the bleeder screw free just so the air can come out as soon as the hose goes on. Remove this boot that's over the bleeder screw. Use an 11mm wrench. Open this up. There we go. Now I'll swap that hose over. I'm going to use a 15mm socket to remove the banjo bolt. There we go. Get the hose off. I'm going to flip that caliper over and let it drain. Inspect the hose to make sure it's in decent condition at least. Clean the surface up with a rag and inspect the mating surface of those 2 crush washers. This one looks good, so what I'm going to do is put the new banjo bolt with a new washer on. On the other side, put another washer on. Bring it over to the caliper, line it up the right way. The hose has to go up and then swoop up and over on the side of the bleeder screw. With an 11mm wrench or socket, tighten this up. Snug it. Once this is snug, tighten it up to 20 foot-pounds. That's it right there. Basically, you're just looking to crush those 2 crush washers, and that's what creates a nice tight seal. Now the bleeder screw is already open. I'm just waiting for gravity to push fluid through. This is called a gravity bleed. Once a steady trickle of fluid comes through the bleeder screw and there's no more air, at that point you can close it off, top off your master cylinder, and perform a full manual brake bleed. Okay, I have a steady trickle of fluid here. So I'm going to close this off, snug it up. At this point, once you've performed your manual brake bleed, clean everything off. I'm going to use some brake parts cleaner as well. Rinse it. That way you don't confuse the residual fluid for a potential leak in the future. That would be dangerous. So get this all nice and dry. Don't forget to cap off your bleeder screw. Pump up the brakes, top off the master cylinder, and let's get the wheel on. Let's get the wheels back on. Put on all 8 of your lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 130 foot-pounds. Once again, 130 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. At this point, if your vehicle had any sort of center cap or hub cap, go ahead and put that back on. For me, I have to put this back on. If you have anything like this, you want to make sure you just snug it up just slightly. It's plastic. There you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.